Well, welcome to the CalcCast. This is the calculus podcast dedicated to all things calculus, teaching, and everything in between. I'm your host, Brian Passwater, and my co-host, Tony Record, is joining us.
And if you're wondering, who these two people are from Indiana that decided to put together this CalcCast, well, we'd like to kind of talk to you a little bit about ourselves, but we hope that we have put together some kind of a program that can appeal to a variety of AP Calculus teachers, whether you're in your first year or if you're a seasoned 30-year veteran. We hope that our guests and a lot of the conversations that we have over the next several months and hopefully several years are going to be of some benefit to you. As for me, my name is Tony Record. I'm from Avon, Indiana, just west of Indianapolis. I'm a 29-year veteran in the classroom teaching advanced placement calculus. I teach at a very large school. We have 6 sections of calculus that I personally teach, and we have a few more that carry over in some other classrooms. I'm also a reader, College Board consultant for the last couple of years, and have done some curriculum work with some various entities around the country, and I'm also a T-Cubed instructor with Texas Instruments. So, Brian, what about you?
Yeah, my name is Brian Passwater. I'm a teacher from Lebanon, Indiana. It's a small rural community north of Indianapolis. I've been teaching calculus I taught for about 6 years, and then I spent 5 years at the University of Notre Dame as the director of mathematics for our AP outreach program, trying to improve and get more AP access to high schools across the state of Indiana. And then last year, I came back into the classroom full time. So I'm just finishing up my second year back in Lebanon. I teach currently Honors Algebra 2, AP Calculus A, B, and BC, and a multi-variable calculus course and differential equations at a school of about 950 kids. Probably about 50 to 60% free reduced lunch. And similar to Tony, I am a AP reader. I'm a College Board consultant, done workshops from San Diego to New York City, and a lot of things in between there for the College Board and a lot of other entities, curriculum writing, professional development, workshops, and the like. So, and Tony and I are just nerdy enough to have this idea to say, you know what we need more of in our lives is just calculus. And so we love talking calculus. We love talking teaching. We love talking about just different things that involve, that show up in our AP classrooms every day. So we've been thinking about this idea for a while, and we thought, what a great opportunity to start this spring. And we're hoping, like Tony said, that everyone gets something from it. We'll talk about calculus and teaching and everything in between pop culture and just being a family person and everything else you can think of. So we're excited that you're joining us for this inaugural session. And without further ado, we want to welcome our first guest, Mark Corrali.
Yeah. Can you feel it, baby? I can too.
How you guys doing?
Great, Mark. How you been?
Same, busy.
It's great to have you, Mark. Of course, I got a question. How does it feel to be the first ever guest for our CalcCast? I mean, we could have gotten Lynn McMullen, we could have gotten Stephen Davis, Dixie Ross, but we got Mark Corrali. So what do you say about that?
It's confusing that I'm your choice.
You were the only one available.
I think saying yes was a qualification.
But we do hope to have those other folks on in the near future. So
Exactly.
That'll bring me back.
So this is probably the nerdiest thing that I think any of us have done, and at least in the last week, but we're going to enjoy the next half an hour, 40 minutes, just talking about all things calculus, teaching, the AP reading, and all kinds of, hopefully, some pop culture in between there. So, Mark, tell us a little bit, for the viewers who maybe not know who you are, tell us a little bit about your background, your teaching background, how you got into teaching, and then how you became active in the AP reading.
First, the earth cooled. I don't know how far back you want me to go. When I started college, teaching was in the background, but I really didn't realize that income wasn't quite as important as I thought it was until later, and then teaching became the number one. And then I went to Michigan State, and the economy up there, pretty well known the situation that is. Let me know if the dog gets too loud. I'll throw that ball so she can. So I ended up in Texas because they were hiring. And I've just finished my 25th year at Ryan High School and 20 years doing calculus. About gosh, after I'd been teaching about 5-6 years, I finally got an invite to read. Started in 2005 when we were in Colorado, still in the college dorms, and then just slowly moved my way up the ranks there, and have been a question leader. This will be my 6th year being a question leader this coming read. I did 2 years on the secure side with the late test and other forms that I don't know if I'm allowed to name in a public forum like that. No. Future form if you want to. And then I moved over to the operational side 4 years ago. So.
And when you mentioned that you've been a question leader for several years now. When do they tell you what question you're reading, and then how do you find all that information out?
Okay. Well, when I was on the secure side, you found out when you got to the reading because those don't leave. Yeah. Operational side, my first 2 years were under Steve Kokoska. He would send them out the same day that the 48-hour release date comes for all the teachers. Those of you that teach high school side of this are very familiar with the 48-hour release. Yeah. And usually, within a few hours of those, he would send out the assignments. Stephen Davis works a little more at his own pace, but we'll release them next Thursday. I probably will know Saturday or Sunday at the latest. Okay. What my assignment will be.
And then once you get your assignment, then do they send you samples from the reading and to start looking over for rubrics?
The first assignment you get. Hi, Luca. This is my dog Luca. That is a hybrid of Luke and Leia, if you're curious. But it was my son's idea, but it worked out. But in any case, sorry, dog's a distraction. Yeah. So when we get our assignments, we'll be told we get 2 TLs to help work with us and select samples and help us figure out how to divvy up the partial credit. Yeah. We'll find out those 2 people, and we get the scoring guideline is written with the problem. So that's not something the question leader comes up with. I know some people with the reading think we do, but that's written alongside the original work, and those point separations are already made. So if it's a 2 out of 2 or 1 for the integral, 1 for the limits, and 1 for the answer, that's all predetermined. Yeah. Getting those changed is possible, but it's getting harder and harder, and I hear in a couple of years it's going to become impossible to get those changed at all. The left side we can change when we find mistakes and or if we want to add a methodology, if students have a second method they found that the development committee didn't anticipate, we can get that left side changed. But the right side is pretty much predetermined. What we get to decide is, okay, that's worth 2 points. What's going to earn 1 out of 2? What's going to take the kid out and make 0? What's going to be enough for 2 out of 2? And we get about 100 to somewhere between 70 to 110 samples. They used to be mailed to the house, UPS. Now they're scanned and sent to us via email. I'll probably get those Monday, Tuesday of the week after the AP test. They come from traditionally high-performing schools. The people who grab those know calculus. There's no blank papers in there. There's no drawings of beaches or cookie recipes. And so we can use those to start getting an idea of how we're going to separate those. The 9s, we know what they look like. We're trying to separate those 5 through 8s. Sure.
So a quick follow-up question. I think this is relevant because the exam's coming up on Tuesday. What are the 6 questions going to be this year?
I don't know if anyone actually knows that. Like, I've never asked Stephen Davis or Steve Kokoska that. I don't know if the QL, if the chief reader knows what problems we're going to have up until that, after that. I'm sure they see them obviously before they send them to us, but I don't know if they know the 6 because all those problems are written alongside. They probably know which ones are going to be used, but some are going to show up on the international and some are going to be on the operational and some will be on the late test. And so, yeah, they have no idea.
So we always set up a pool.
Yeah. Now, if I was a betting man, I actually told my kids, I have a feeling, and I haven't, of course, confirmed this with anyone, so this is completely my supposition. This is nothing to do with my position, but I get to say it because you guys, for some reason, are interested in me. Number 6 looks like it's in the BC, it's always series. On AB, the last couple of years, it's always been a multi-representation. Yeah. And I wonder if that's going to become the norm. I'm really curious to see Thursday, and I'll find out with the rest of you. But I'm going to be interested if there's a table and a graph there or a table and an equation or something like that.
So if you had to predict, because from my class, I don't know if you do the same thing, but I always make predictions for my kids. Yeah. So like, if you had to guess, and we'll all 3 do this, and that way we'll see. So we'll all 3 predict this, and then whoever's the worst predictor has to buy dinner at the reading. How about that?
And by the way, for anyone that is considering being their guest, they did not tell me this ahead of time. Fortunately, we're all nerdy enough. I've already thought about it, so it's worked out. All right, so you want to go BC or AB first?
Let's do AB.
Okay. Let's see. So AB 1 or 2. Okay, here's this might be a flyer. I think the table problem will be on the non-calculator this year since it was on the calculator last year. So
Okay.
I'll go with that.
Mhm.
The table's going to be on the non-calculator. But I'm going to go traditional area volume this year. We haven't seen one on AB in a couple of years, but there was one on the international last year.
Yep.
Very
So
traditional.
I think a region R, do this stuff with it.
For a calculator question.
For 1 or 2, yeah.
Okay.
So what do you guys got? We got to take turns. You're not going to put me on all 6.
I think we're on track. I've been debating. Tony and I were talking earlier before you joined us about the area volume question, whether that was been a trend with the operation of the last few years, or the IPE from 2017 was a better indicator. So, but I'm going to say I think one of the 2 calculator questions is going to be another particle motion problem, but this year with the calculator.
Okay.
Tony, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm relieved to have at least the hope that the traditional area volume isn't going by the way of the dinosaurs. After the funnel problem of 2016, which was the potato problem of 2016, I guess. It's nice to see that the 2017 international exam featured the traditional. So yeah, I think that's a strong possibility. I think they're still going to maintain the conceptual differential equation, and I feel really strongly about a free response L'Hopital's rule on the AB.
That's actually probably a really safe bet.
Yeah.
I would even go farther and say it's going to be on the graphical representation one.
I think so. I think that would be, or it could be on the DiffyQ if it's not very contextual.
It'll be part D. It'll be either part D or part B, and then we start something new.
Yeah.
What do you think on the graphical? Are we going piecewise, or are we going back to a something that looks differentiable, or traditionally like a polynomial looking?
On the graphical one, I still think it's going to be something that's probably a piecewise function. I think it'll be a function defined by an integral again.
Okay.
I think they like
that.
That
was a derivative, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
Tony?
Well, through all this conversation, I was getting ready to say we probably should put the disclaimer out there that we do not know.
Oh, no.
We are not making any kind of 100% guarantees.
On the off chance that a teacher watches this between now and Monday, do not take this to your students.
That's right. So yeah, I don't know. It could be a piecewise. I think a lot of it just depends on where the placement's going to be. Calculator or without calculator. So.
Yeah.
My big flyer is this. Mark predicted the area volume, the old school problem coming back. My flyer is I feel like there's going to be a piecewise algebraic function question on the second half of the test, and they're going to have to do because they can do some continuity, they can do average value, they can do some different derivatives with that. I think I don't know. I feel the piecewise function coming algebraically this year.
Yeah. This show's just going to be, we're going to have to change the name of the podcast to 3 Math Guys Speculate. But I do like that idea, because I like the idea that there was, on one of those practice tests or on the international test, there was that piecewise integral that went across the jump discontinuity, and it threw teachers.
Yep.
But it's something that obviously they're willing to test, and if that showed up in an FRQ, that'd be interesting.
Yep. And I think what we need to do here is let's just keep naming questions. And then once the exam's over, we'll just edit this to pick the 6 that were actually on the test. We'll look like a bunch of geniuses.
And we called it.
I'll double down on Brian's rectilinear problem and say it's going to be either a parametric or polar against it on the BC side.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good bet.
Okay, here's an idea. Because they did this on the practice test. Do you think they're willing to lead off with the non-common?
Ooh.
Because they did that on that practice exam, and that was weird because the kids just jumped right into BC material.
Yeah, that's true. They could. I'm curious. What do you think their logic is on that? Because the ETS is the one who organizes the questions, right? Not College Board in terms of the order of them.
You you just asked a question so outside my realm. That's I know two people I could ask who would know, and I don't know if they'd answer.
Yeah. Hey, when is the last time that one has not been a common on the operational? Has it been?
I could tell you, but I'd have to turn you off for a second and go look at my Google Drive.
It's been a while, I think, at least.
That's something I'm going to look up tonight now, though. We can put it in the notes in the comments at the bottom, right?
I bet there'll be 3 common questions. I'm pretty sure that.
Yeah, that's a really good bet. And 18 of the BC multiple choice questions are going to be AB material, or 27 of them, right? 18 will be BC, 27 will be AB.
I would imagine if we went to one of our dens, you've seen that movie A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, and he has like all the papers all over his office with the strings attaching on trying to prove everything right. This is sort of what I imagine a Mark Corrali office has, just trying to predict the FRQ.
The funniest thing about that is one of my kids said the same thing like within the last week, because we were actually having this conversation of what do you think is going to happen on tests, and somebody said they pictured that if they went to my house, they'd see these maps of this is what happened that year. And honestly, I don't game the system like that, because I know that came up in one of the Facebook groups. Someone asked this question, and in that group I wasn't willing to answer it because it was like a month ago, and I don't want to try and game it for my kids. I just want them to be ready.
Yep. I tell my kids the same thing. They're going to ask you a question that you've never thought about before, you've never seen before. And if you're trying to just follow patterns all the time, you're going to see that question and just be stumped. So, which is actually a good question. What do you do with your kids, to prepare them for those oddball questions? How do you instill that problem solving, using old AP questions as a background, but then also trying to find ways to tackle new questions that they haven't seen before?
Well, and just go ahead and put a plug here. Someone else you should have as a guest is probably Dennis Donovan. I think he'd be a good guest for you guys. But Dennis and I have talked about this, and I don't know when in my teaching, like those 9 problems, I always look forward to those 9 problems. I geek out, I get a pad of paper and I sit down, I try to do all 9 of them as completely and quickly as I can, because it's 9 problems I haven't seen before.
Yeah.
We're so familiar with our textbooks and our other resources and the stuff we've made. And, but at some point, in the last 20 years, it went from reading a question and just stopping to reading the question and going, oh, this is what they asked in 2004 on the international test, or, oh, it's the landfill problem again. This is landfill baby bird. That was the reaction of the experienced teachers to the potato problem. But to the kids, those were 6- and 7-year-old questions that they may not have had put in front of them.
Yeah.
And so to them, it was just daunting, not to mention the fact that, as Verge will tell you, the internal temperature of the baked potato, or the internal temperature of the potato, was used 7 times within that problem, and kids got bogged on that. But that's what I do. I try to, and I think Lynn McMullen may be where I got this from, if I didn't get it from someone that stole it from him first. But I threw the potato, baby bird, and landfill problem all at my kids at the same time. I went and found 4 Riemann sums that did left, right, midpoint trapezoid with tables, put them all on one sheet and gave them to my kids so that they stop reading the story and they start just reading the calculus. Yeah. Because that potato problem may not have started about a potato. It was clearly a Newton's law of cooling problem. Yeah. But it didn't have to be a potato. The banana problem last year could have started as a traditional water in, water out. It just became bananas out, bananas being restocked. And once you get past that, they start looking more familiar to us. And so the only thing I've thought of is trying to get my kids just to look at those old problems so they start seeing that they don't have to see all that stuff. Yeah. Even if it does make really entertaining Twitter feeds for 48 hours.
Yeah.
That's right.
I didn't create this, but I stole it from someone at the College Board, but that potato problem, I gave it to my kids this spring after we covered Diffie Qs, and I gave it to them. I gave them 5 minutes just to read it and do what they can, and I knew their eyes were kind of like, what is happening here? But then once they were done with the 5 minutes, then I gave them a second problem, and it was the exact same question, but I used no context and only X's and Y's. So I just gave them an equation, dy dx equals the differential equation, and I said write a tangent line, solve the differential equation, and they did pretty well with it. And I think it showed them, okay, like you said, we have to look at the calculus and not get bogged down by all of the context. The context can be important to help you understand some things, but sometimes kids, they lose the forest for the trees sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the context can help you see if your answer is reasonable sometimes. But
Yes.
then we'll have kids challenge that. I mean, you guys both read, and it's. I remember when we had the rocket problem, whenever that was, like 2006 or something bizarre like that. The rocket was really slow, and for people of our generation, even if you don't remember the moon landings themselves, we all remember MTV using it for their promo films. And
Yep.
Saturn V's are slow when they start. You take a 5-story building and put a rocket on it, it doesn't take off fast. But kids picture missiles.
Yep.
And kids were writing, "This is too slow for a rocket." And it's like, kid, do the math. Trust the math.
Yeah. I actually, you talk about the landfill problem. Some of my really bright kids came back and were upset about that problem because they couldn't understand why the amount of trash in the landfill would affect the rate that it's being growing. Like,
Right.
This doesn't make any sense contextually. And that actually tripped them up. And I was like, in this case, just blind ignorance and just following the math would have been a better strategy.
And then your stat kids are trying to figure out the correlation.
Yes.
Okay, more trash means more people means.
Yes, exactly right. All those mitigating factors, or
it's not just a function of time. This is a model.
Exactly right. 100%. So, we're talking about some of these AP questions. 2 questions for you. You can answer in whatever order you want. What has been your favorite FRQ you've seen the College Board ask? And then what do you think has been the toughest one? I think we know about the 2007, the table question, like a 0.96 average. But I think if that was done today, we'd see a 2.5 point average on that. So just in the time period, what do you think is the toughest question you've seen?
That I've personally graded, or just overall?
Just overall, just your favorite question you've seen, and then there's one that you thought was, wow, this is a really tough question.
My favorite, I honestly don't have to think about. It was BC4 in 2012. I'm almost positive that's the one it was, where they did an Euler approximation, a tangent line approximation, a Taylor polynomial approximation, and I can't remember the third one off the top of my head. But they were doing the same problem 4 times in a row. And some kids caught it, and some kids never even noticed. And I believe, talking at lunch yesteryear, that I think I know who wrote it now, but I don't want to say it on here because if I'm wrong, I don't want to insult who did write it. But I believe that I also heard that that's one of the few problems that ever made it all the way through committee without ever being changed.
Wow.
The left committee the way it came in. But that was such a cool problem because I had the revelation as I was doing it. Like, oh my gosh, it's like I'm just doing the same thing different way and I'm getting slightly different numbers.
Yeah, that was the table problem, right?
That's cool because if you make that connection, you're like, I mean, as a teacher, it helped me. It was like, oh gosh, I can revisit these ideas. Like, we know we're supposed to spiral, but
I think that fourth method was the Riemann sum approximation, wasn't it?
Oh, of course, that would make that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I remember my kids came back that year and they said, on one of these problems, we got 3 of the same, like 3 of the 4 parts were almost the same answer and one was way different. I'm like, well, you did 3 of the 4 parts right. I'm guessing.
Or one.
Exactly. Either you were terribly off on 3 of them or you were off on 1 of them.
Yeah, and that was cool too because the AB for that year was a medley also because it was the chain rule, find a tangent line. Now the function you were just playing with is part of a piecewise. Is it continuous? And then integration with a chain rule. And then as far as hardest, I mean, obviously the series questions are always, whatever. But it's also question 6. There's fatigue there. There's teacher experience teaching series. The gravel problem really threw kids. Jenny Wexler's problem in 2015, which is not the right way to refer to it. She was the QL. But the one that had the differential equation with the mx plus b in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We had seen it on an international form a couple years before, but even then it was tough.
Yeah.
But that was a part. I mean, for an entire question, the piecewise driveway, the snow on the driveway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That one was Susan something, and Susan was a real person. Actually, I think Susan's picture was on the table notes. So yeah, I mean, there's parts I remember. it's funny when you first said it, and I stopped before I started waning poetic about BC4 from 2012. I had one in mind, but I wanted to get to that. Trying to think now. I mean, the polars are always iffy, just because the kids.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, what do you guys have an idea of one? I mean, because you may say one.
I think you did I think you hit them that year you mentioned with the differential equation where it was mx plus b in that last part.
Yeah.
That was the only question I've ever had a beef with how they organized the parts, because in part B of that question, students had to find the second derivative. And that was how I came up with the solution. To me, a much simpler solution is if the solution was a linear function, then the second derivative had to be 0. And so if you just set your answer in part B equal to 0, you're done. Because I think it was something like 2 minus 2x plus y equals 0 or something like that.
Yeah, I think we actually, you and I discussed this online a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. I was like,
it.
yeah, if you just, just wrote that down, but they kind of switched to part C, which was maybe a minimum or maximum or something in between there. The kids weren't really thinking about that continuation, but that was the year they had like two different differential equations on that exam, and never once asked them to solve for the particular solution. And so many kids across the country, as soon as they saw let f, y equal f of x be a solution, they just start,
Oh yeah, separate the variables. Yeah. Well, that was. Oh, what, Tony?
In every part, right? We're just going to solve in every part of the problem.
Oh yeah, and it's the thing is like many teachers, I was saying, you're going to have separation of variables on the test. It's going to get you 4 or 5 points.
Yep.
And there was a year there wasn't.
Yep. Oh, when I had to change it, I tell my kids, like, if you see the phrase let, that is not asking you to do anything yet. When it says find or solve, and then all of a sudden on the potato question last year, my kids were looking for that phrase, find the particular solution, and all it said was find G, and the kids were like, what are we supposed to do? And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But
that comes back to if they'll just make themselves write it in terms of the traditional XY independent dependent, then they'll see it. And I always think on let. I said if I was a student taking the test today, because when I took it, it was all abstract. It felt like, at least.
Yeah.
But whenever I see let, I always want to put okay. Done that.
Done.
Suppose. What's the appropriate amount of time for me to suppose before I continue?
Yeah. I remember grading an exam one time and the question said, consider something. And the student just drew a picture of themselves with a thought bubble with them thinking about the problem. I thought that was pretty clever.
How does that show up in the scoring guideline? Did the student consider?
Yes. Like technically they did. I mean, they made a conscious effort to consider it, but I don't think it was awarded points in that case. Tony, did you have a favorite question?
Going really way back, I guess, the amusement park. I mean, it kind of ushered in a whole new era of in and outs, and that's kind of special.
It was the granddaddy of the banana problem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the one. Isn't the amusement problem the one that they had like the 2-year history of on College Board? Like they kind of gave you it was like a 5-page document that showed the evolution of that problem, how it had started and then how it adapted, through different committee decisions and how it ended up being what it was. And I think that was my first real appreciation for how much time and considerations go into these problems.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they still have that document on the AP Central anymore or not, but it was a neat little read to see how that problem happened.
That is a deep website.
Yes. And things aren't always where you want them to be. I remember the potato problem, well, not the banana problem this year, grading a bunch of those questions and seeing kids talk about the acceleration. So now that's Tony's dog.
That's my dog. Oh, that's right.
But on that banana problem, grading that, they had to interpret one of the rates or something. I think they had to interpret the second derivative or something. And I read so many papers talking about the bananas were accelerating off the shelf at a certain speed.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, no, I think you missed it on that one.
I think
so. We're going to transition a little bit.
Camera here for a second because I've got to go get a power source.
Oh, nice. Tony and I will we'll fill the time. And Tony, we can.
I'm still here.
You're still here. We just lost your.
I just didn't want I didn't want to make everyone seasick walking to the house and getting a cane. We can edit this out, right?
There was one. There was an international exam, one of the IPEs recently, that had a really challenging graph, and it was on AB and BC, and it was. I think Tony you and I were talking about this the other day. I think maybe I was talking to Lee about this, but it was kind of a funky looking graph, and it was not even continuous. It was like an implicit defined function, and it had like kind of an ovally shape, and then it had sort of like a U on top of it, and my kids just got destroyed by that. I'm thinking it was 2015.
Yeah,
IPE. And it was just, my kids couldn't even figure out how to start half the problem. I mean, they struggled on it. But I always love the series problems. Like anything with series, that they always do so much clever stuff. You know, like you kind of follow along and you're not really sure what they're doing or why they're doing it. And all of a sudden you get to the end and something cool happens. You know, like what was the one from a few years ago where they had a series and then they had to find f prime of the series, and it ended up being geometric. And so part C just said your answer from part B can be written as a rational function.
That was 2015-6.
Yeah, that was those questions are so clever, man. I love those questions.
That was my first operational QL, and people were bad at that one. I was just using the infinite geometric series to draw it. And
yep. Well, I told my students, like, what's the when you hear rational function, the only thing we've dealt with have been geometric series. Like the sum is a rational function. It's not hard to to make that connection if you just think about that. But man, that's a tough question.
And that's something for teachers to just take back to their kids, is if they ask for the sum, it's an infinite geometric.
Yeah. If it's not a known series like sine or cosine.
Right, exactly. Or it's one of the three you're supposed to memorize. Other three.
Yeah, we do the exact same thing. We talk about that in my class all the time. Just if it's saying what's the sum or what is this series, like think geometric. That's a pretty good indication. But
if it's got factorials in it, start looking at sine, cosine, and
Exactly right. So what's your favorite calculus topic to teach?
Ooh. Someone's got a motorcycle out. Favorite lesson has got to be integration by chain rule. Just because of the pun fest. We're going to make the problem all about you. And, it's indefinite. Well, it was indefinite. We got to go back to our X. And if we're definite, we never have to go back to our X. We can make it all about you. And, then we got to look at the relationship between you and your X. And it's just, they just write themselves and new ones pop up. And because I've taught those kids in Algebra 2 and possibly my PSAT course, I've got kids in there that are X's, and it's just so delicious. From a mathematics standpoint, I love polars because anything, actually, I'm going to change that because polars just falls into this. Any lesson where they leave an hour and 20 minutes after coming in, knowing about something they didn't know existed 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
Those are the cool lessons. Logs in Algebra 2, the first time you talk about the fundamental theorem of calculus, when you start playing with polars and thinking of area radial instead of rectangular for the first time. And just that, when you see them making connections and feeling like they've accomplished something, they haven't just come in and gotten the next step, that it's, I didn't even know about this thing. And now look at what I can do now. And I can write something that will scare my friends that are in AB or scare my friends in Algebra 2. That's the stuff I enjoy. I enjoy it so much I throw the phone.
Can't even contain yourself. So, I'm curious about your school, Mark. So tell us about your school demographics and meaning, like, what's the size of your school? What's the,
now that I've got you back.
And also expand on what your schedule is. I mean, obviously you do teach calculus, but talk about some of the other courses that you teach there, just in Denton.
Yeah, in Denton, Texas. We're north of about 40 minutes north of Dallas, 40 minutes north of Fort Worth. We're right at the peak. Those of you in Minnesota that know about the 235s, sorry about covering the camera, I'm trying to get myself situated again. We have the 235 split. 35 splits into 35 East, 35 West. One goes through Dallas, one goes through Fort Worth. Same thing happens in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which I found out thanks to the glory that is MST 3000. They made a reference to 35E, and I'm like, a Dallas reference? I went and looked it up. But when I started 25 years ago, we were the only high school in Denton. Denton was around somewhere between 60 and 80,000 people, depending on whether the college was in session or not, because we have two universities here, University of North Texas and Texas Women's University. And we were one high school. We were about 2,500, 2,400 kids, somewhere around there. So very widespread, because we're kind of at the end of the suburbs. Everything north of us is farm and ranch, and everything south of us is traditional suburbia. So we have low income, we have upper income, we've got some lakefront property in our school district. So we really ran the gambit back then. Then we opened a second high school. Beginning of last year, we opened our fourth high school now. And we're up over, I think, 150,000 people in our district. All three high schools are over 2,000. We fell in right around 2,400 this year. But we've gone from being that everybody to, for when we were two high schools, we had more of the upper income kids, I think, although they tried to split it as evenly as they could. But we're a Title I school now. We have enough. I think we're. I want to say we're 40% minority, but it can get close to 50. And our minority split's almost 50-50 African American, Hispanic American. And then we have a small Asian population as well. As far as but I mean, our district does a pretty good job of trying to keep the socioeconomic split. So I've got some kids that are from some fairly well-off families, and I've got some kids that, leave, go home, work their job, or take care of their younger siblings. Both parents are still at work or whatever.
Yeah.
I teach one AB, one BC. I've been trying to build the program for a couple decades, but of course, splitting the school off constantly takes those kids away.
Yeah.
I think a school our size should probably have more calculus, but for whatever reasons, we don't. We don't have a large population coming in as freshmen doing Algebra 1, and already through with Algebra 1, which of course that just, if they don't double up, it slows you down. You got to set up some summer programs and things like that. And I think, one or both of you do a summer program, I think, to try to leap kids forward? Or, do I remember that? Or Tony or Brian, do you?
We don't do a summer program, but we do a lot of doubling up. So I'll go
doubling
down.
up,
Yeah, because I teach at a pretty high, free reduced lunch type population. Right. And we have about 900 to 1,000 kids in my school. We're closer to 1,000 now. And we just don't have enough kids that are coming in with the prerequisites, right? You have to have Algebra 1 in 8th grade to have a shot. And so I used to really push hard into those Algebra 1 kids who were successful, just to try to double up, just to give them a chance at either stats or calculus, but at least to be in the ballpark,
Right, either one, exactly.
Yeah, just give them a shot at it. I don't know. Tony's school is much bigger.
Yeah, we're 3,100 students now, and we actually have two different tracks of advanced placement calculus. One that will allow students to take AB as juniors, and the other that would allow them as seniors, and then we have a 2-year cycle for our AB and BC. And we do some creative things with students along the way in sort of eliminating an Algebra 2 course and consolidating the pre-calc into like a separate course that's called college algebra. So our kids essentially take 3 semesters of algebra instead of 4 semesters of algebra instead of 5, if you think about Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and pre-calc. And then we have 10 sections of AP Calculus, and it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of hard work to build it from 12 students you know, in the last
Wow.
years. So.
Yeah. And Mark, you mentioned how about up to 50% of your kids at your school are minority students. So what kind of things can you do, or do you recommend to teachers to help teachers who have kind of the similar demographics? How do we get our classrooms to look like our hallways? You know, one of the things I noticed is a lot of schools, you know, you have 50% of your students minorities, but yet you go into the classroom and it's 5%, you know, and it's
Now,
always a equity and access issue.
Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that because I'm fortunate enough that we've always looked like our demographic. That I've never had that where I've had a big disparity between what my room looks like and what the hallway looks like. So I haven't had to actively try to change that. I think it starts at the ground roots, right? You got to get your counselors active. You got to get the teachers who teach those younger classes to look past that. And I know the kids we miss, the ones that come out as seniors, who I wish I'd had earlier, you know, and we have a lot of move-ins. We get some migrant population, and they come in with English as a second language.
Yeah.
And I think those students, we have to make a conscious effort at that 7th, 8th grade level of finding out if they're talented at math. Hi, Kara. Sorry. My 2-year-old's coming out to look at her chickens. Are we trading locations?
I can send her over here.
Okay. No, this is fine.
I
right.
figured ice cream outside as well.
All right, we're going to mute your screen again.
Perfect.
All right, can you still hear me okay?
Well, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can.
We're swapping. It's the evening chickens, and my wife has just come out with her glass of grape juice, and
Well, at least we
daughter.
know if you ever make it to the development committee, your first question will be a chicken question. Chickens coming in and out of the chicken coop.
you know, it's funny. The chickens happened while I was at the reading last year. Suddenly there were Facebook posts about collecting wood for a chicken coop.
Every time I leave for a long period of time, my wife will let me know when I'm gone that we've either purchased a new pet or she's purchased something for the house. That's kind of her way of keeping me not gone so much.
Yeah, my wife is very bright, and she's an AP bio teacher, but she also knew that it was much easier to have the chickens here when I got back than see if I was open to the idea or not.
Yeah, forgiveness over permission, right?
She doesn't need my permission, but forgiveness over arguing first.
So she wants them, you say no. She wants them, you say no, and you compromise and you get them. Is how it works in my house.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's more like she asked, I said I don't know, and then they show up. So, all right. So, all right, we need to change the lighting here. Let's see. Echo, turn off reading light. Echo, turn on buffet. All right, so my smart home little effect there. All right, so but in any case, we were talking about something else.
I think equity and access.
Yeah, I think those are the kids that I miss, where I get them as juniors in Algebra 2, and you're just like, man, you are so freaking sharp. And you just realize that they were never considered because of the English skills in the 7th and 8th grade. And so I need my 9th grade teacher to kind of be more on the lookout for those kids and look for that double up route at Algebra 2 geometry. Or I've had some make the jump from Algebra 2 to calculus, kind of doing what Tony's saying, where over the summer they can kind of do a Khan Academy, get through that pre-cal trig section on their own if they're really motivated. But
Yeah.
honestly, at AB, you can kind of teach it as you go anyway, because it's the second time they've seen it. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think keeping the door open is a big part of it, don't you?
Oh yeah. I think one of the issues we have, I think Tony and I have seen this a lot as we've traveled and worked with different teachers in schools, is you get a lot of gatekeeping going on.
Yes.
And it's either gatekeeping by the calculus teacher, or sometimes that gatekeeping happens like earlier, like the pre-calc teacher just crushes kids, you know, and the kids think they're not ready for calculus, and they actually are pretty strong conceptually. They just might need some more strengthening of some of those algebra skills during the AP course in context.
Yeah, it always bothers me when I hear a pre-calc teacher talk about some grade threshold, like, you know, C plus B minus, you're just not going to be ready. But, you know, it it's not called the AP Algebra exam, and it's, the conceptual learning is really the key there. And I think there's been a lot of kids probably across the country who maybe have been talked out of trying calculus because of that.
And you bring up a good point that if a C+ kid isn't ready for the next course, then why are you passing them with a C+?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of it's the other side of the coin of grade inflation.
Yeah.
Is that B's become the average, and B's a strong grade.
Yeah.
and,
Yes.
and C should be, you've got some gaps, but you can take the next course.
Yeah.
If you don't want to take the next course, you shouldn't be passing them.
I think we all agree on maybe algebra and pre-calc really shouldn't prevent a kid from being successful in most of the calculus stuff. But based on that, if you had to say these are the 5 most important algebra or trig or pre-calc, things that your students should come in with, focus on these, because we watch the Facebook page and the AP calculus forum, and I see all kinds of people posting about sum and difference formulas. I'm like, that might be an important formula, but that's never going to be tested,
Yeah.
And these aren't the things that are going to prevent students from being successful. But what are your 5? Make sure your kids can do these coming into AP calculus.
I certainly, just before I answer that, they need to have seen sum and difference and the trig and the polars and that. That's all prerequisite, but it's first exposure. They shouldn't be mastering any of that. You master it when you use it. You master multiplication tables while you're doing algebra. You master the pre-calc skills in calculus. So yeah, if you say what are the most important algebra skills throughout the course, that's a much different question than what you just asked me. And what you just asked me is what should they have coming in? They should be able to factor, distribute, and not just trinomials. Binomials, throw them. They see a binomial with x squared minus 5x. What am I supposed to do? They need to be fluent in that skill. They need to be fluent in factoring, solving set equal to 0, some of the contextual stuff. Seeing a problem in a contextual context. Bringing our conversation back a little bit and reading context and then not reading the context, being able to figure out what the mathematics is.
Yeah.
Because we shouldn't be showing the related rate problem should not be the first time they've seen a word problem in a year and a half. So, yeah, I would say honestly, the Algebra 2 skills are what they should be fluent in.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are going to say, radicals, fractional exponents, negative exponents, asymptotes, and the pre-cal, the traditional pre-cal, the polars and that. That's the stuff they actually master while they're learning the calculus.
Yeah.
But I think my list of like 5 basic skills, I'd probably go through my first 2/3 of my Algebra 2 curriculum and pull them from there.
Yeah. Yeah. My BC kids come into me and they've never even seen polars. They've never seen a parametric. They've never seen a series or a sequence in our pre-AP curriculum at all. And so I tell teachers, would I have loved them to have it? Of course. But like, if they're at that level of BC, they pick up on those things so quickly, especially making connections to other things that you've taught during the year.
Well, that's the thing is, all we do is take everything we did the first 2/3 of the year and staple it onto those.
Yeah.
We don't even do arc length with polars, and it's not that tough for them. Like you said, those really sharp kids, they go, oh, we're just doing this, and they move on.
Yeah. What's the one topic that, your kids have struggled with the most, that you're still trying to figure out, how can I continue to find ways to help kids understand this idea or this skill in calculus?
This isn't the whole class, but there's always a pocket of kids that I really wish they could see a constant numerator as an opportunity not to use the quotient rule.
Yep.
I had a kid this week do that. Like, he got the right answer because he knows the derivative 0.
Yeah.
I just wish he'd make that connection of when that happens, he could back up a little.
I call that putting a fire out, putting a match out with a fire hose.
Yes, exactly. I always talk to my kids about having a toolbox full of hammers and like chain rule. That's a pretty big hammer, integration by parts is getting close to jackhammer level. And then you got your little ball pin hammer, and you don't want to be trying to break up your curb on the side of your house with a ball pin hammer, but you really can't bring a jackhammer in to hang a picture on the wall either.
They'll try.
They'll try. Oh yeah, absolutely. Some of them will get it done. The picture will cover the whole. It'll be fine. It'll get the job done. But I just avoided your question, so that was nice. Good dodge. Man, I just had a meeting this morning with my kids. I'm trying to think. This isn't necessarily a calculus thing, but it's an AP calculus thing. Is appropriate use of the calculator, and not talking about the kids who multiply 5 times 15 on the calculator and should know that, it's somewhere between 70 and 80, but the kids who they're graphing the first derivative and looking for mins maxes on a calculator active multiple choice, and they don't bring the y window down.
Yeah.
They'll shrink the x window to the domain, but they'll leave it at -10 to 10.
Yep.
And that curve that looks tangent is really crossing, or they'll assume it's crossing, and it actually never even hits. And I had 8 kids at a session this morning at a coffee house, and I stopped them all. I said, you all need to hear this. Set your y window from 0.5 to -0.5. Yeah, because all we care about is those crosses on this point of inflection problem or this relative min-max problem. Those things, using it appropriate. You guys all gave the practice test this year. Number 1, common question. Take the derivative, find the derivative at whatever it was, 3.5 or whatever. And it was doable by hand.
Yeah.
But it had an exponential with a trig chain. And I think 80% of my kids tried to do it by hand.
And then plug the numbers into the calculator when they were done.
Yeah,
like that's what my kids do. Then they plug in 3.5 at the end.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, guys, there's this math 8 thing. It's under your alpha F2. It's wherever it is on your Casio. You're allowed to do a numeric derivative. It's the first problem on the calculator section. Remember, you can use your calculator.
Yep.
And so I think the ability for them to be fluent in how can I use this tool to help me the best.
Yeah.
Which I guess is kind of a cop-out, because I'm basically saying I'm good on the calc. But I'm not. But that's the thing that I somewhere I'm missing that completely with some of them.
Yeah. What kills me about my kids, the rate in, rate out problems, using the calculator, setting f equal to g and then finding that point. My kids have gotten really good at that. But kids, for some reason, forget every time that they have some function equals 1 or some function equals 2, solving for that. There was a speed problem a couple of years ago. When is the speed equal to 2 or something like that? And the kids are like, well, how do I solve this? I'm like, why wouldn't you just graph? There's a number on that right-hand side instead of an equation. They space it, they can graph a number and still set those 2 graphs equal to each other. It just, using like calculators to solve equations, my kids always forget you can do that.
Yeah. Tony, you got anything?
No, that last description reminded me of a problem I just added to a little pre-work that I do really at the beginning of the year, and that is to make sure that there are more than one ways to solve an equation, and a lot of times we are a school that does use CAS, but CAS can sometimes kind of get you into trouble, get some erroneous results. We just had a situation on the 2017 International where that was the case. So graphing was always a little bit better avenue.
There was it was funny. I almost posted. I remember someone posted something about that. A lot of my kids don't use. They always graph on the graph. They always graph to solve. And I said, well, there is a solver, and a lot of people say it's more accurate. And I went to show it, and it was amazing how many of my kids had never even seen the solver on the 84. And it was the same one that was giving people trouble with the CAS. And my 84 kept finding the other point. I had to actually restrict the domain around the other one to get it to find that point. And I never played with it anymore to figure out exactly what was going on there. But even when my guess was left of the left answer, it was finding the right answer first.
Yeah.
The domain was wide enough. So I'm curious if that was by design or not.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I hear that a lot of those CAS engines, the algorithm, it's Newton's method being used in the background, and it can kind of produce some interesting results sometimes.
Sure. What are your biggest pieces of advice, Mark? So for a new calc teacher or even an experienced one, as you look at the FRQs, you know, as we score these, not just your question, but just the 6 of them that you've seen over the years, what are the things that you see happening over and over and over again that you're like, these are my big 3 or 4 pieces of advice for an AP teacher?
I would say, because we get lots of questions, whether it be through AP Community or the Facebook group or just in general and through workshops and that, people always want to know what the minimum we take is.
Yeah.
And don't ever take the minimum in your classes because you're setting the kid up. If a kid comes in with something that looks like a minimal answer and they miss anything, they haven't met the minimum now.
Yeah.
And if we can get them to write complete, full answers and they make a mistake, they get some credit. There's avenues for partial credit with a mistake within a complete, full answer. And so raise that bar. And to the point of, I'm not a fan of abbreviating. I'm not saying I'm ever going to advocate for not accepting what's an obvious abbreviation during the AP reading. I mean, that's a completely different thing. We are very aware the kids are in the second half of a 4-hour test. They're exhausted. But if they're already abbreviating and they're exhausted, weird things happen. You know, kids spell negative, you know, like, you know, and then it's like, can I really give credit for, N-A-G or, nag, like, okay, yeah, that I can probably, but, it's just weird stuff happens, it's a Meg, So I guess my advice would just be that know the scoring guideline, but try to get your kids to match that left side, know what gets the points so you can coach them. Because I mean, that's what it is. Once we get to practice season, it's coach up the kids that are beat up. I had one girl sitting there this morning, said she was getting depressed. And I was like, let's look at the stuff you got right. Let's look at some of these other ones. And, but then, I've got my kids that start to get lazy because they got a high 4, low 5 on the practice exam. And those kids, you kind of have to be like, yeah, but if you got lucky on this one, make sure that's a fuller answer and things like that. So you want to know that minimum so you can coach up that kid who's getting worried.
Yeah.
You can even say, yeah, I docked you for this because I want you to write the full answer. But, that probably would have gotten credit on the AP test. So, keep trying on that one. But try to raise your kids to that left side of the scoring guideline. I think that avoids a lot of the problems we see when we start talking about what's allowed on Lobatal, what's allowed for discussion of continuity and differentiability, and it's what's allowed with increasing, and just have the kid write the complete answer and take that decision out of the reader's hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always that balancing act, and Tony's probably the same way, where my kids who are pretty strong, I'm having to constantly I don't want to say discourage them, but I try to tell them they're not there yet, because those kids are a little bit arrogant when they're in this March and they've got a high 4 or 5, like, I got this made, and then they kind of slack a little bit, and that's when they get lazy. And then keeping those kids who are 1s and 2s, in the game, just say, hey, look, in my class, we do an FRQ, we score them as a class, but then I always tell them, how many points did you leave on the board? How many points, now that we've scored it, do you feel like I could have or should have gotten those points? And once you look at those, I say, if you just can get the ones that you knew how to do, you would pass the exam, and so even though you got a 1 on this, even though you got 1 out of 9 points, you told me yourself that there were 4 of them that you knew how to do. You just made little mistakes or forgot something. And if you would have gotten those 4 points, now we're talking, because now you're above the average already,
And somebody had posted something in the Facebook group about what's the one piece of advice you give your kids, and mine was keep reading, because leaving those points on the board, it's like you read A and B and you quit, and C is a whole new problem. It's one you knew how to do.
Absolutely. So Mark, I'm going to give you this is called Fast 5.
Ooh.
So I'm going to ask you 5 questions, but you can't think about them.
That's easy.
So you got to answer your first thought. They're not going to be hard questions, I promise. So are you ready? And these are
All right.
the category for this podcast is favorites. So your 5 favorites. Here we go. Number 1, favorite movie.
Star Wars.
Which one?
The one that was called Star Wars when it was released.
Favorite question 2. Favorite
For New Hope. You said not to. You said don't think.
favorite food.
Steak.
Cooked how? What's your cooking preference?
Medium rare.
That's a good choice.
And no sauce. If you're gonna get sauce, get a hamburger.
You know what I was thinking the other day? I saw something on Facebook that A1 sauce was invented in 1865 or
I
1864.
saw that same thing.
Yeah, and I'm like, someone said, who in the middle of the Civil War thought, you know what we're missing right now is a good steak sauce.
This steak needs some vinegar and ketchup, really bad.
Yeah, so this gangrene's hurting me, but what really helped me right about now is an A1 steak sauce.
You want the morphine? No, but if I could have some sauce for this steak,
I
that
can
would
die
be
in
it.
peace. All right, question
Like-
3. Question 3. Favorite place vacation?
I'm sorry, it cut. Favorite place what?
For vacation.
Colorado.
Question 4. Favorite superhero?
Superman. It's cliche, but it's because if I wanted to be a superhero, I want to be the one that's got all the powers.
Isn't Superman like in every single Seinfeld episode? Isn't there like something about
Yes.
that where
He is.
there's a reference or a picture of him somewhere?
Yeah, well, he's got a figurine in the apartment, so that was kind of a cheat on a lot.
a little bit of safety one. And final one, favorite song or artist?
Ooh, all right. That I'm sorry, I know you told me not to think, but that's a day-by-day thing. I'll tell you what came to my mind first. Because this one comes to mind first many days. Hunger Strike by Temple of the Dog. Because especially if you know the story behind how that album happened, especially. And then artist, and this is a flavor of the day, but for the last couple months, Charlie Parker. And because that Charlie Parker and Strings album is probably the only album I've listened to its entirety every year for the last 20, 30 years. I've other days I might say Led Zeppelin. There's a lot of them out there, and hair metal I'm all about, but I always can fall back to that Charlie Parker and Strings. So.
Yep. So you mentioned Star Wars favorite movie. Who's the bigger Star Wars nerd, you or Verge? Who wins the Star Wars trivia?
Oh, I will win the trivia. She's been a more consistent nerd. I really didn't embrace it. I mean, it was always my favorite. I saw it in kindergarten, right? And had that first batch of 12 action figures, and so I had the action figures growing up, and it was my kindergarten to 6th grade was the first trilogy. But then I left it. And it was in my late 20s I started reading all the EU stuff. And it was great because it was all out there already.
Yep.
So I read like 100 books in like 7 years, So the trivia side, I've got her now, but she's been more dedicated. It's been her guideline for her life. So
living. So should we? So for her intro music, so Verge will be on here in a couple weeks, our next guest. Should her intro music be the Death March, or I'm going to let you decide what her intro music should be?
she's definitely not Death March. Does Yoda have a theme?
I don't know.
Because
You're the guy that should know that.
I've never had the
Yankovic.
Empire Strikes Back. I've never had the Empire Strikes Back soundtrack, so I don't know if there's like a Dagobah or Yoda.
No, there was Weird Al Yankovic's version of Yoda.
Oh, of
There we
Lola.
go.
That would be beautiful.
There we go.
That would be a wonderful. That would be, and that's another good artist right there. So I think not just both of them, Reed and Yankovic. So
That's right.
that was a Lou Reed song, right?
There we go. Yeah.
Or was it Lou Reed or was it Kinks? It was Kinks. He took Lola.
Kinks.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
So-
Walking the Wild Side was Lou Reed. That was a little different.
Is Weird Al the most underappreciated artist of our time?
3 years ago, maybe. But then he released that last album, and all the kids know him now, and they'll go to the concerts.
It's his greatest selling album all time.
Yeah, I mean,
His lace
he'd
was
given up. He released the whole thing online because it was like, yeah, and then it just blew up on him.
That's right. Continuing with getting to know Mark Corrali a little bit, another thing that
Oh, geez, I thought the 5 questions was going to be the end. Oh.
we're gonna always kind of make this a sort of a mainstay of the program. But you know, you're obviously a teacher, and a teacher's job is always very difficult. And I can probably, we'd all be in agreement that an advanced placement teachers has got some extra stresses placed upon them. But when you talk about also going into the world of curriculum writing and consulting and reading and being a question leader, it does take a very big chunk of your time. And what we want to know is, you've got a Saturday afternoon and you don't have any commitments that you've got to do curriculum wise with your students at your own school. What is Mark Corali going to do for himself during a Saturday afternoon?
Are the kids around?
Your choice.
Be careful.
No. I don't mean your kids. I mean mine. on this mythical Saturday. My wife isn't a big movie person, and growing up I was. My sister and I used to go to the movies all the time, and so lately it's been a fun pleasure to take my son to movies. We went and saw Ready Player One a couple of weeks ago, and we've already got our Han Solo tickets bought for the Friday before I leave for the reading, so we'll get that notched out before I leave, and when I come back, we'll go see Incredibles. So that's one. Going to a movie with Philip is a good one. But if no one else is home, I'm on the Xbox. That's and racing games are my main. Forza Motorsports, Forza Horizon, Rocket League. Rocket League's perfect because it matches the sports games too, which I enjoy the sports games. I used to play first-person shooters more until the kids were around, and then I stopped playing them because I didn't want to explain to them why a headshot was fun. And now that my son's playing first-person shooters again, I actually do play them occasionally, but now I'm no good at them. So they take too much. There's too big of a learning. The logistic curve's a little too steep for me. But yeah, that's to me, that's a stress relief. If I go a week without playing video games, I start to get a little batty because I just don't think about anything else. Used to be soccer, but it got to the point with finding enough people my age that are playing. I had to drive an hour and 20 minutes to play an hour and a half game, then drive an hour and 20 minutes back. And that wasn't fair to my wife to be gone for 5 hours to play an outdoor soccer game. So I still play indoor once a week in an over 40 league. But that's a much smaller time commitment and much less beneficial to the body, to be honest. It gives the illusion of exercise.
Exactly. Well, Mark, we're going to let you go. And the last question that you have to answer for us is going to be, what's the sock of the month? So what was the May sock? So you might want to give a little bit of a background too, for the people who don't know about your sock fetish and how you get these socks. But then tell us, what is the sock of choice this month?
Okay. Yeah, it was kind of an accident. I mean, I've always liked having character socks, and I've picked them up here and there, and I always liked having holiday socks. I'd always have Valentine's Day and Thanksgiving and that. But I started doing Loot Crate a couple of years ago. If you're not familiar with Loot Crate, it's a nerdy sci-fi, science fantasy, and you get a crate once a month. You pay $15 if you do it monthly. I pay quarterly, so I get slightly less, and you're guaranteed like up to $40, $25 to $40 worth of stuff. And sometimes it's cool. The Black Panther t-shirt was awesome. The Infinity War t-shirt was really cute. But there's a level up. And for $7, you can level up and get 2 pairs of socks. And I jumped on that when that became available because the couple times they'd come with socks, I really thought they were cool. And it really stunk because this month was Fortnite and Captain America, and they were both too small. So my wife got 2 pairs of socks. But hi, Kara. But for May the 4th, I did get a pair of Yoda socks and a pair of Rebel Alliance socks. And then last summer, I just was packing, and I knew I had to wear slacks to consult in. It was my first summer doing summer workshops. And so – what?
I'm busting my face up.
Oh, no. Okay. Sorry, my wife just came in. Yeah, this is the last question.
Okay.
Hi, guys. Hey, Carrie, you want to come sit in my lap?
Sorry.
It's okay. Hey. I'm sorry about that. Oh, yeah, that's my little hands here. But anyway, I picked out 5 different pairs of socks for that first summer workshop. Okay, I want you guys to see this cute little girl. Hi, Kara.
Aw.
And sorry, I'm gonna flip you over. Yeah, that'll be. There we go. Hi, everyone. There we go. All right. Yeah, that little spin there. There's Kara. So I took an Instagram picture the first day at the end of the day, and this was actually, I think, Brian, was this your workshop?
It might have been
it was
from
actually-
Indianapolis.
I was
Yeah.
Spider-Man the first day, and a couple people saw it, and I posted the second day, and then people started asking, "What socks today? What socks today?" And because I'd been doing this loot crate thing, I actually was able to get through all 20 workshop days last summer wearing different pairs of socks.
That's
And I'm
pretty
starting to
impressive.
Because the Spider-Man ones died this year, the heel fell out, and the Pokemon ones too. So I may have to do some shopping between now and the first workshop to keep this up. But
Might
that's
have
how.
to.
And Brian he started following and started asking, and now my kids ask every so often what I'm wearing. Carrie is a 2-year-old ball of energy.
Is she going to be a future mathematician or a future biologist? That's the question.
I don't know. We've joked that the boy's going to go into theater arts. This one we haven't decided yet, but we figured they'll reject us somehow. But actually, Philip, my son, actually really enjoys math, and I actually apologize to my wife for liking math more than science. But he's 10. He has time.
He got time to go to the dark side.
That's right. Well, he has time to figure out what it actually is, too. Yes, Tony, I don't know why, but she's trying to touch you. She's trying to poke you in the eye.
Well, Mark, it was a blast talking to you. We appreciate giving up your family time, talking to
I
us.
apologize for the occasional intermissions.
No, this is what makes family so awesome, is that kids don't know anything about what's real and what's not real, and I think it's great that you brought her up in here and let her sit on your lap for this last little piece here.
My wife just said she's sorry for this.
It's fine.
You're forgiven.
No, I put my tooth in because the chicken scared me when I was hitting her egg.
Nice. So that's what you get for having chickens.
Well, I'll look forward to hearing what you get when you're gone at the reading this summer.
Yeah, I don't know if she can get any more. She got a 4th chicken the other day. All right. Well, I think it's going to get harder and harder to talk to you guys. So thank you
right.
for having me as a first guest. I'm always confused and flattered that people think I know something. So appreciate it.
No, it's our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. I'll see you here in a couple weeks.
All right, great, man.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys. Well, thank you guys for joining us for our first podcast. Tony, what was your big takeaway from Mark today?
Mark's such a great host, or great guest rather, because he's got such a wide, wingspan in the world of advanced placement calculus, from a writer to a question leader to a consultant, and he's also a pretty darn good teacher at that. So I think it's a great way to start. I think we can only build upon this, and I know a lot of our members out there, we might end up, or some of our people watching we might end up having you as guests on CalcCast, but we'll be reaching out to several of you most likely, because we hope that this is something that we can do for quite some time, and we hope that it could be of a benefit.
Great. Thanks so much, Tony. Thanks again to Mark Corrali, who joined us tonight. And we will see you guys here in a couple of weeks with our next guest, which will be the great Verge Cornelius. And Tony, are you going to wear Yoda ears for that one?
I think it must be done. One of us has to do that.
Okay. I'll let you do them, and I'll wear Shrek ears just to see if she can notice the difference.
There you go.
All right. Well, this will conclude our first CalcCast, and we'll look forward to you guys in the next one.
All right. Take care, everyone.
I was wondering, if you could keep on, because the force has got a lot of power, and it makes me feel like